So I would like to officially welcome everybody to our conversation. It is Let's Talk About Diversity, Honest Advice, Observations, and Conversation. And we're so excited to have Christopher Rittenauer here facilitating this conversation. It's a great follow-up to a wonderful session he did for our virtual event this year. So we're pleased to have you. Christopher is going to start out with giving a little bit of background and kind of setting the stage for the conversation and then facilitating it. But we hope you'll enjoy it, you'll join in, and you'll be stimulated and maybe challenged a little bit and have fun. So Christopher, it is all yours.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. First of all, I'm grateful for all of you that decided to spend this kind of time. And what I'm finding about the virtual experience, which is different than a conference experience. So we have what? We have, 9 people on the call right now. I couldn't even imagine showing up to a venue that has seats for 250 or 300 people and only 9 people showing up. But you know what, since I think in the early days, probably 18 years of the 20 years that I've been doing travel, if 9 people showed up in an auditorium that held 300, what I do recognize is that the people who physically showed up were the individuals who were supposed to show up. And part of my guess is you can relate to me on this matter is that if we don't focus on what we're most grateful for, what's going right in our lives and in our circle of influence, it's really easy to be distracted by the stuff that's going wrong that we possibly cannot do stuff about. So I am extremely grateful to have this opportunity. And this is a conversation too, because so much of what I'm doing right now is into my webcam, and I may see the number of folks involved, or I may not see the number of folks involved, and there wouldn't be an exchange. And even before we got on even before you were let into the session from the waiting room, I shared with Joan, like, the conversations that are occurring right now around diversity, equity, and inclusion, at least for me, it's hard to put it into presentation form, because could you imagine this, Eileen, that you were invited to speak at a conference and somebody said, okay, you have an hour to talk about your life. Are you kidding? Right? Where do you start? Right? So there's the dark period in the 60s where you experimented. Yeah, I got it. And how do you share that with people? I'm just thinking about all of these kinds of things that are now very much in our face. Hard conversations. And I'll tell you what, even before 2020, these were difficult topics in general. And in 20 years, I have been to precious few buildings. Now, just in thinking about that quickly, a little bit about my the background is currently I work for an organization that manages 6 life plan communities. And I've been in aging services for the last 20 years. And all of a sudden, the year after I started in the building where I worked 20 years ago, I did a conference, and I was invited to speak at another conference, and then invited to speak at another conference, and then on and on and on. And then 20 years later, I'm hanging out with you at Pioneer Network that I think I've probably, Joan, you tell me, if I haven't spent time at Pioneer like 4 or 5 different times, if not a keynote, then doing a session or a plenary or something or another. And this was not the plan. Like, I had no idea that I'd be in front of all of these people over the last 20 years. And I don't know how many of you have had an older person tell you, well, it's not bragging if it's true, but what has been true about 20 years is that since 2000, I've been to at least 5 or 6 conferences where there may be, I don't know, 300 to 500 people. And then with the individual consulting and training that I do in buildings across the country, it really does provide an aerial view of aging services in healthcare. Like I swear to you, I think I've seen everything. And there's some buildings that are, you walk into the building and just the air is crackling because people are walking up and down the halls, no matter who it is, no matter what position, no matter how many years of service, no matter religion, race, culture, it doesn't even matter. But people are just walking up and down the halls. Good morning. How are you? I'm grateful to see you. Today's going to be another great day. And just the environment and the culture is absolutely infectious. And then you know that you have the other extreme where people are just passing each other in the hallway as if they were strangers, but they've worked together for the last 10 years. I mean, you just have the range of experience and the range of cultures. And as an African American male, because I feel I need to be honest and upfront and transparent, as an African American male, there have been so few of me on the talking circuit and in a number of our buildings in major cities that occupy leadership positions. Now, it's not judgment, it's not value, it's nothing, it's observation and just numbers. That's it. As I've also traveled, it's just been interesting to be in this place. And let me ask you this: how many of you in any aspect of who you are as a human being, was there ever a time that you felt included, that it felt good to be a member of a group? And even as I think about identity, it could be female, it could be college educated, it could be mothers, it could be, I mean, whatever the thing is, give me a thumbs up. Let me know how many of you have ever felt that spirit of being included, right? Just included. And even within the Pioneer Network, I remember, Joan, when, because I was used to doing Leading Age and American Healthcare Association. And I remember my first presentation at Pioneer, and there was a little room where the speakers were gathering. And here I was, Christopher, and I talk about teamwork, and I'm a goof, and I put on Santa outfits and all the rest of it. And I'm sitting around this table with some pretty high hitters, and they've invented stuff and the Eden Alternative, and it's just me, Christopher from Philadelphia, and I'm sitting around this room, and they were just talking about concepts. And I also did not grow up in healthcare or aging services before I got to aging services. So theories and history, that's just not my thing. It wasn't my thing when I first started. And I'm sitting around the room, and they were used to each other, and they had seen each other on the speaking circuit. And I'm just sitting there, just looking around, and it didn't have anything to do with race. It didn't have anything to do with being a dude. It didn't have much to do with anything except for there was just a different knowledge base. And they were comfortable with each other because they had traveled together and they had followed each other, after the keynote, and then, there was just an interplay. But then as I spent more time, we began to talk about families. We began to talk about children. We began to talk about just travel. And then all of a sudden, the world got smaller. And then whatever the differences were, because we had created a culture out of 6 people, the feeling was different. And what I find right now is, here we are, 2020. Saturday was monumental in America. And that has nothing to, and wherever you are, red state, blue state, or Canada, at least here, it was monumental in a number of different ways, no matter who it is that you are. So let me ask you this in the chat, or, take yourself off of mute. Give me the emotions that you have experienced over the last, I'll say 72 hours. Give me an emotion that you have experienced over the last 72 hours. Just give me something. Oh, and I'm seeing some stuff in chat. Joy, relief. What else you got? Emotions you've experienced over the last 72 hours. And everybody has experienced emotions. More anxiety, sadness, cautious optimism. What else you got, gang? Hope, hopeful, cried with relief, hope, frustration. Now let's think about hope, just hope and frustration, anxiety and joy. Like you figure there's a whole lot of stuff that's occupying everybody's bandwidth. And let's multiply what we've experienced, no matter who it is that we are, by the number of people that you have in your building and in your organization. Just multiply. And everybody is coming in with a different perspective, a different life experience, different hopes and aspirations, life goals, personal challenges. Everybody is coming together. And in 20 years, what I think about culture and our building cultures, and I think this more widely about just people in country, is that the culture is defined by the conversations that we're having. And what is it that we're talking about? What is it that we're allowed to talk about? What is it that we are brave enough to talk about and courageous enough to talk about? What is it that we're fearful to talk about and not talking about? And it feels like that's where we are right now. And I don't know how many of you feel like you've been rubbed raw just with the nature of the conversations that we have been holding certainly over the last election period, but even before that, no matter who it is that you are, Republican, Democrat, Independent, other, Lyndon LaRouche, whatever the thing is, there are just so many different feelings and emotions and convictions that are going on, even as we try our level best to bring world-class care to the elders and the residents that we serve. Oh, and before all of this jumped off, we were still in the throes of a workforce crisis and keeping folks engaged and excited about showing up and keeping people in our buildings, retention, morale, and just finding people. And now there's a global pandemic and all of the political acrimony. And at least on the East Coast, we have red lantern flies and murder hornets were sighted on the West Coast. I mean, what, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I don't care what your position is. We weren't trained for this. And here it is. But I'll tell you what, one of the goals for this conversation, and every single conversation that I have, no matter what the topic is that there's going to be a plan, and there are solutions, because I believe that there's solutions. I really do believe that there's solutions, and it's certainly going to take some courage and things we have not done before, or we have not done as much of, that we need to show up and be more courageous and demonstrate our convictions to everything that our mission, vision, values say. Because everybody has the same exact mission, vision, values. So with that, I'm going to give you a quote that I think is pretty apropos to right now. And it was written by Marianne Williamson. She's a poet. She actually ran for president, if you recall, Marianne Williamson, but she's a poet, she's an author. She is of a spiritual religious background, and I've adapted this. So whatever your faith tradition, or if you don't have a faith tradition, you'll get this. I promise you'll get this. It goes, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, talented, fabulous, and gorgeous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about your shrinking so that others won't feel insecure around you. We were born to manifest glory, and it is not in some of us, it is in all of us. And when we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give people permission to do the same. When we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.
Wow.
Give me the first thing that comes to your head or your heart with those words. And when we play, when we're together, there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer, because judgment kills teams. Judgment limits the impact of good leadership. When we judge situations, we give folks an opportunity to feel undervalued, misunderstood. All right. So no judgment, no value. As I just shared that, what comes to mind for you? What comes to your mind and your heart? Sharing. I saw wow, exclamation point. What else you got, gang?
Incredibly fulfilling.
Fulfilling. And you know what? I always think about my job description, and come on, we're pretty talented people. Are we not? Do this. Because we are, we're talented people. And just modesty aside, you and I we didn't come this far without skills and abilities and talents, because it's true. It is absolutely true. And there has never been, at least in my lifetime.
So angry. I don't need to pay copay again, parking again.
Oops.
Oops.
There's our COVID world, right? Life is real. And the talent that we have, given where we are right now, there's so much more that's needed now than just the talent. Two things were shared with me when I got into aging services, and I heard this all of the time. And just nod if you've heard this before: nurses eat their young, right? So nurses eat their young. And that was the first thing I heard over and over and over again. And I still hear it in 2020. And it's used to make excuse for certain behaviors and things that show up as a result of the stress and the regulation and the emotion that's involved with taking care of folks that you grow to love and see them decline, right? So our feelings are attached to the folks that we care about. So nurses eat their young. It's also called horizontal violence and relational aggression. And there is this much body of research that talks about it. However, have any of your organizations done any training or town halls or any kind of education or leadership development specifically around nurses eat their young or horizontal violence? Do that, do this, but do something. And what I find is that the symptoms that show up are pretty familiar. How many of you have seen
I know you meant well.
or done or have experienced another team member looking off into space as you were talking to them or they were talking to you? Or you never want to have second shift meet third shift in a dark alley, right? I'm just thinking about the ignoring and the shunning and the criticism and the fault finding and the nitpicking and the just all of the stuff that goes with consistent, understaffed, and to a degree that lack of bravery or courage or accountability. And we write up team members more than we actually do leaders. And then we're surprised that we have a workforce crisis. Now, here's where this all comes into play, given our conversation today. With the symptoms of the stress that everybody is under, And everybody, no matter what level it is, we're not doing anything, we're doing precious little to build a relationship and truly build a culture where everybody feels
No, you meant
supported
well.
and safe and a sense of belonging. And diversity, equity, and inclusion are part of humanity. And we don't spend enough time in building humanity among team members, because the second thing that I've heard consistently over and over and again is how much we love our residents. And it makes sense because that's what we have chosen, and it fulfills purpose, and perhaps that's what we were born to do. And regardless of the actual position, we're all rowing in the same direction towards the well-being of the elder, the resident, the participant, the client, whatever it is that we call them in our building, and the service that we provide to them. We don't spend enough time making sure that every team member feels loved, and that is absolutely critical. And it prevents burnout, and it creates engagement and high morale. And I'll tell you this, if and I'll just and if you'll allow me to just pick somebody on the call, could you imagine this? So Penny, when you and I, when we know without a shadow of a doubt, as we come into the building, that we belong here, belong, and with all of the insecurities that we have kind of hanging out back here, and the I'm not enough, and I wonder what today is going to be like, and just the battle, struggles, and challenges that we're experiencing on the outside. If we came into our building and our building served as an oasis where I could put down my crap because I have a leader and not a boss, I have a role model and not a manager, I have a coach and a mentor rather than a director, my goodness gracious, could you imagine that culture change? Whew, that is major. And the 7 dimensions of wellness, because I know the stuff, the 7 dimensions of wellness that we look to bring to our residents so they're spiritually taken care of, socially taken care of, physically taken care of. They have wood shop and pool and chorus and all the rest of it. Could you imagine if we spent half of the energy that we use to worry, finger cross, complain about why folks don't get along, half of that energy on making sure that folks without a shadow of a doubt feel the sense of belonging from their team members, because elders and residents do not burn anybody out. That's not how burnout works, because we signed up for this. And every now and again, and you tell me if this hasn't happened to you, because it's happened to me, and it's happened to colleagues that look like me. Every now and again, there'll be a resident, an elder, that will look at somebody with this complexion and say, "You, I won't work with." But wait a minute, that's in addition to a colleague who ignores me on my team. It's not the residents that burn people out, it's team members. And that's team members on my team, and that's team members in leadership. I mean, I'm thinking about everybody as a team member.
And Christopher, there was
I'm listening.
there was a comment as you were talking there.
Oh, thank you.
There was a comment from Jackie, who is with Park Springs, and she said, "I feel free that we do a great job at here." Jackie's got they've had some wonderful stories of how they have pulled together and worked with a very diverse work group. And I don't know if Jackie would like to share a little bit of that.
Oh, Jackie, yeah. Give us, how about share with us the kind of the flagship thing, or the thing that you think made the biggest difference.
And you're muted, Jackie.
Yeah, I know. I had to go to my phone, so I really apologize for all the glitches.
You're good.
when I came from isolation over here, when we did our lockdown, they dropped my computer, so the mic doesn't work. So I apologize.
Oh, Jackie, don't spend any more time complaining or give,
Nope,
oh,
I'm good. I'm happy. I am happy. So see, there we go. You lost me again. There we
we're
are.
good, we're good.
So what we do here is we have a very unique training program that really emphasizes the need to be vulnerable.
Mm.
And to do this work, it's more than care. It's about the caring.
Mhm.
And to be a really caring, compassionate human being, we have to get rid of all of those old lessons that we've been taught.
Mhm.
So Tim Knight and I pulled together this really unique training program. We call it the Spirit Training Program. And it covers all of the household model of care, but then it goes much deeper into what it really means to share the human experience. And we encourage people to bring themselves to work, the good, the bad, the beautiful, whatever it is, because like you said, life happens. We encourage our team members, our care partners, our leaders to really feel brave, to hold
Mhm.
each other accountable. So if I'm walking through the hallways and Andy Isaacson, who is our owner, is walking through the hallway and I see him do something that doesn't fit our model of care, I'm free to say to him, Andy, that's not what we do here.
Mm.
Repercussion.
Mhm.
And I think that it's really important that as leaders and mentors and coaches, that we allow our staff to hold us accountable as well.
Mhm.
So if I'm
Mhm.
out in one of the households and I do something that, might seem like it's controlling care or something, the care partners can say to me, Jackie, did you see what you just did? And it allows us all to kind of take a step back and kind of, oh, you know what, you're right, I just did that. Or, no, this is what I was doing. So let's talk about what you perceived.
Mhm.
And it's about allowing people to be themselves.
Yep.
It's about allowing people to develop those deep and meaningful relationships. And it's about building each other up and not pulling each other back down. So
Hmm.
I have to send somebody to another person or to another department or to something, something that it's not in my scope of practice. It's, I'm not going to say, oh, well, that's an IT issue and they take days to get back to you.
Mhm.
I'm going to say, you know what, that is an IT issue. I can't fix it, but I'm going to reach out to Andy and then I will follow up with him until make sure it gets done, because I know he's going to do a great job for you, but I'm going to check back.
How
It's
long,
about,
when did that, when did that start? Like, how
so,
long has that been happening?
so the Spirit training is the third version of the training that we've done. So we've been doing it for the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually start the training process when we interview.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Hey, gang, you know, what that brings to mind for me is all the work that, so certainly Brene Brown and the vulnerability, and the Patrick Lencioni vulnerability-based trust, 5 dysfunctions of the team. But I'll tell you what, that makes me think that, let's just think about write-ups. So across your organization, have there been any conversations about what constitutes a write-up? Because if I'm coming in and I am operating at a deficit, or I'm highly stressed and anxious and I'm battling whatever it is that I'm battling, personal, professional, my tolerance, my patience, my empathy, you can imagine is going to be here rather than here. So if I'm the DON and my most effective tool, or at least I believe, is a write-up, because they have to know what is right. They have to know what's right. But then dining, it's different. There's an imbalance. And that speaks to education. And then I think, okay, well, does everybody feel really good about what the performance review can be used for? And has there been training on the performance review? So that if I'm one that is, that I'm at a half full, and that's the way that I see the world, if I'm half full, then that performance review is going to be an opportunity for me to say, oh my goodness gracious, we just need to tweak some stuff so that you're an even more effective aide, or you're a more effective unit clerk, rather than, are you kidding me? You came up short again this year. if we are not clear about those things, those artifacts of our culture that really speak to relationship and professional self-esteem, we're going to get the results that we can expect. And that vulnerability, you know, I thank you for sharing that. I thought about that courage, because all of a sudden, could you imagine this? Hey, Jackie, are you willing to play with me? Cool. All right, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay,
Jackie, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I am awesome. Jackie, if I was any better, I'd be you. So, hey, Jackie, could you imagine this? So just in thinking about courage, right? And thinking about vulnerability, because they're the same coin, just opposite sides, right? Because as human beings, it's hard for us to say, you know what? You got me. You know what? I am a crab. You know what? I am a grouch. It's hard for us to do that. And there's all kinds of psychology, fundamental attribution error, and negative
Okay.
bias and confirmation bias. And there's just so much stuff that stops us from being open to feedback.
Exactly.
All right, we good? And especially when we're stressed, we're less likely to ask for it and less likely to be open to it. Hey, Jackie, ask me if I'm open to feedback.
All right. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
Ask me if I'm open to feedback.
Christopher, are you open to feedback?
Oh, yeah. And right after, I'm going to give you some feedback.
Okay.
Didn't that feel like that to you?
Yeah.
And
you
even with
seem
the
a little
vulnerability and the
defensive there.
courage, that didn't feel like that.
No.
And Jackie, here's what I wanted us to do. All right. So even in the kind of the conversation about diversity and equity, and diversity is certainly not just race, but it is also geography to some degree. It is also sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, culture, and all of the stuff that's below the surface. So you can see me and you can make assumptions about my age. You can make assumptions about it. I think I look pretty male. I think, my complexion, right? So you can guess at some stuff. And in our buildings, the stuff underneath that we can't see is a lot of the times used is not thought about in identifying who we are. All right. So all of the stuff that I think about, whatever you are, your femaleness, your age, your this and that and the other, it's the stuff that I have underneath that you can't see.
Wow.
That I'm assigning to you as your identity, even if that's not how you assign your identity. Right. So it's the stuff that it's my childhood. It's my church, it's my school, it's the news, it's it's my grandfather who told me I should not play with you. And then all of a sudden we're in the building right now, not talking about any of this stuff.
And that's one of the beauties of our training, is that we have a day that is all about sharing our life story.
Imagine, oh my goodness.
All about.
And you know what I find, Jackie, is that there's so few opportunities that we create for one another to share stories. And the stories change practically everything.
They do.
And let's just think about this, because even as we think about ageism, right? Even as we think about ageism, how many different trainings are there that say, wait a minute, this is not an age, this is a human?
Well, ours does. But.
And so many organizations, which is why Jackie's culture is pretty novel. We don't spend the time. And we spend time managing the crises rather than the building of the relationships and the actual culture. And then we're surprised that there's a workforce crisis.
If you concentrate on the sharing of the stories and the vulnerability, you don't have a crises.
And I'll tell you what, all the time that we spend on putting out the fires, there's where that feeling of, oh my God, how much would it be worth in the value of creating the belonging?
Mhm.
So that no matter who it is that you are, no matter who it is that you grew up with, and the feelings that we have about individuals who have not pursued a college education, who are in your building as their second job, and they can't fully focus because they're concerned about having their lights shut off. But then if we start in orientation, and let's just say that I'm a manager and Eileen, you're a manager, and Eileen, you believe in that sense of belonging and encouragement, but I don't. I mean, that's just not my perspective. Even if we start at the exact same time with the exact same duties, you can imagine that our paths will be very different at the same exact organization. So here's a question. Here's litmus test time, all right? How many of you can think of at least one person with whom you work that apparently both sides of the bed are the wrong side for them to get up on?
Yeah.
Can you think of a human being that you work with? How many of you can think of at least one human being that you work with that you'd advocate for workplace tasers over defibrillators? How many of you can think of at least one person that you work with that if you saw them about to sit on a thumbtack, it would take you a little bit longer to warn them than you would somebody else? Are you kidding? How many of you can think of at least one person who is so stinking sarcastic that you think that they would take a medal if it was an event in the Olympics? These are the things that are killing our cultures and stopping that sense of belonging. And here's where the courage comes in. Because we know these human beings, and whether they report to us or their peers or they serve above us, it is the silence or the inaction that is causing the pain that we are currently experiencing with this workforce crisis and low morale. People are allowed to be mean in our buildings in a professional capacity and then lead others. And that's the hard part. And I honestly believe that there have been places that I have not been invited to because my message is, I'll tell you what, when we're good to one another, that's the secret. That's all I got. Well, I don't know because we're concerned about our margins. Are you kidding me? If we're not focused on the mission, I don't even know why you're considering the margin. And this is from somebody who did not come from aging services. And it feels like, well, wait a minute, I'm looking around, I'm not used to the language, and I'm just looking at human beings and saying, well, why isn't that one nice to the other? Aren't they on the same team? And then you get lower and you find out that the stress and the anxiety and all of the feelings that are attached to our positions are both something that makes us the heroes and the champions and the warriors that everybody now in the world understands that we are. But we've been heroes and champions and warriors forever. And now the world understands. But the same stuff that gives us a champion's heart and allows us to take heroic actions and exercise heroic feelings with those residents who need us, the opposite side to that is that those emotions, if they're not replenished in the workplace by other human beings, those are the things that will create the nurses eat their young. And that's the observation for 20 years. And as an African-American male in a female predominant profession industry, I'm an outsider. And do you know how often I've heard that's just how women are? I hear that all the time. Oh, well, that's the department. It's all women. They're so catty. And then I think, well, wait a minute. So I'm not a woman, but I'll tell you what, there's value and I can appreciate the work ethic And oh yeah, that's a symptom of the stress rather than all of a sudden I'm labeling a whole gender. And rarely do we have education on any of this in our buildings. I think the great news for each and every one of us, and there are 13 folks that are engaged in this conversation, and the idea is that, you know, for the next month, anybody can kind of tune in and think about what it is that we're talking about, and just bringing, I don't know, to light or exploring, is that everybody on this call, we have what it takes to make a difference, not just in our department, but in our entire organization. And I would say in the world as well. I mean, I can't change everything, but doggone it, I can change the stuff where I am. And I'm clear about my mission and I'm clear about my purpose. How many of you recognize that, let's see, hey, Beth Long Higgins, you're the next
Hello.
contestant on The Price is Right. So Beth, how are you today?
I'm okay.
Good. Beth, my sense is, would you agree that you're amazing, Beth?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you agree that you are wonderful?
Sure. Yes.
Got you. How many of you recognize that that's different than okay? And this is part of where I'm going with this, Beth, is that there's so many things that you and I were experiencing
Okay.
in our organizations and departments
I am
in our
angry.
world. Does this make sense to you, Beth, that I'll tell you what, we'll do this. Beth, if you wouldn't mind taking the next 30 seconds to share the story of your life. All right. Now you have 30 seconds. You can't include everything, but whatever you think is important, whatever you don't mind sharing, no judgment, no value, right? No rules. 30 seconds, share the story of your life with me. And of course, I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I'm not prepared to do. All right?
Okay.
All right. So Beth, go for it. Just 30 seconds, the story of your life up until this very moment. Go for it.
Okay. I am native to Ohio, although I haven't lived here my entire life.
Uh-huh.
I grew up in the church. My father was a pastor, and I thought I was going to work with older adults when I was in college.
Uh-huh.
And I made plans, and God laughed and sent me to seminary.
Uh-huh.
And I went into ministry for 25 years
Mhm.
and turned 50. Have two now adult children.
Mhm.
That ministry was with my husband. We were co-pastors. And
good.
after I turned 50, I was offered a position in an organization where I was serving on the board of directors.
That's
And so
30 seconds.
And I joined the staff. And 7 years later, I am here. And this is what I'm called to be doing, working for older adults.
Gotcha. All right. Hey, gang, as you hear Beth's story, what can you relate to? What's also true about you? What is also true about you? What do you and Beth have in common?
Well, I changed careers. I was in professional photography for 11 years.
Got you. Okay, so changed careers, like major life transitions, right?
Yep. And then I did it
one of our
again
colleagues
here.
says, Alan said God laughed, right? We make plans, but they have nothing to do with the plan.
Right.
What else? A calling. Thank you, Jessica. A calling, like a mission, right? A mission, desire to work with older people. Okay. So here's my 30 seconds, and I will self-regulate because in my head, I kind of get a sense for what 30 seconds is. Let's see. Hey, Beth, like you, I have 2 adult grown children. I think what I'm currently doing feels pretty mission and purpose-y for me now, and had no idea that I'd be doing this. And this is the longest I've done anything. I grew up in Pennsylvania, which I think relates in some ways to Ohio. We feel like cousins to me from the time that I've spent in Ohio. Did I mention the fact that I was African-American male? Did I mention that fact? I grew up in Philadelphia, only child until 8 years old. hated my brother because he was 8 years younger than I was, grew to love my brother, and he's my best friend now, married, divorced, 30 seconds. Okay? Hey, gang, you heard my story. You heard my story. Is there anything that is similar for you? Is there anything that resonates or rings true about you in my story?
I have a sister who is 10 years younger than I am.
10 years. Yep. So we have younger siblings, Joan, right? Thank you. 2 adult children. Thank you, Penny. Also person of color. Thank you, Jessica. Oh, 2 kids. Yes. Yep. Anything else? 5 adult children, 2 kids as well. Now I want us to think about this, because in 30 seconds, without value or judgment, we have an opportunity to start creating culture in small bits. And just so thinking about Jackie and the training that they do there. I mean, in my organization, we do a bunch of training as well. And it gets to humanity and not just those medical mandatories, because we don't assume that everybody is coming into the organization with the same skill set at helping everybody else feel like they belong. We don't take that for granted. Oh, and by the way, there's a unique way, at least I work for a Lutheran organization, and there's something to this grace thing that's a part of the Lutheran tradition, and we're not assuming that everybody's clear about what grace is. How can we create culture for our elders and residents if we're not creating it for our team members? How is it that we're doing it? And I'll tell you what, if each of us is courageous enough to spend the 30 seconds, I'm interested in your story. We could do that as soon as we get off of this call. The next time we have stand up, the next time we have the Zoom team meeting, or if we're in a building, the next time we're masked up at stand up or report, there is an opportunity every time to make sure that we're creating a sense of belonging. And to me, that's purpose, that's mission. Because our titles don't describe mission, they describe functions. And everybody on this call recognizes that there's so much more to your job than just being the title. I don't want to be anybody's director. I don't want to be anybody's manager. I don't want to be anybody's supervisor, and I would hate to be a boss. But if you ask me if that other side of my job description that goes with the mission, vision, values, I would love to be a confidant. Check. And I do things to be a confidant to every human being in my building. Red state, blue state, independent, African American, Asian, Latino, because it has nothing to do with my job description. That's a purpose function. Of course I want to be a confidant. Of course I want to be a coach and a mentor and a partner, and definitely a leader. Even if I can't hold anybody else accountable to that, and there's where the courage comes up. I have to have the courage to hold myself accountable to that. And when we do that, we experience a whole lot of peace, a whole lot of peace. So Beth, when I asked you, I said, hey, how are you doing today, right? And even in the beginning, when I said, just name all of the emotions that you are currently going through. And, we just have all of them at opposite spectrums, right? Once Saturday came around and I was having a yard sale. So I didn't know what the heck was going on in the world. And one of the folks that was at the yard sale, her daughter called her and then gave election results to the customer at my yard sale. And she just let out a big exhale and was like, wait, what's going on, right? You found a treasure. Sweet, I'll sell it to you, but that wasn't it. She had been told that her candidate was the winner and that her world would be different as a result. Now, I'm no judgment, no value. I'm not, because I'm not. And it was interesting to me because where I want to be safe walking down the street. I want my African American sons to be safe walking down the street. I struggle with organized, nationwide human beings whose purpose is to make sure that diversity is not welcomed, nor does it flourish, nor successful. That's my perspective. And I can do, I can exercise my right to vote as an American citizen. And I can be upset that, are you kidding me? There's voter suppression and everybody's talking about fraud and will my vote count? And oh my goodness, neighborhood message boards are nothing but acrimony, and you're wrong. And there's so much that each and every one of us are dealing with, no matter what side of the aisle you sit. But the great news, at least for me, is that when I come into the building, there is an organization with mission, vision, values that says, I don't care who you are, this is who you're supposed to be.
You guys
And-
lost out on a good employee.
Say it again. Oh, I thought there was a, and in thinking about that mission that at least the organization talks about, I know that each member of the entire organization could be very clear about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable if we were only more brave and courageous. I've read a lot of stuff, and we could have Patrick Lencioni this thing, and we could have Good to Greated this thing, and we could have If Disney Ran Your Hospital this thing, and there's so many different resources and books, and we could have Gallup polled this thing, and we could have gone to all of the books and all of the research, but I can't help but think about that old adage that says mean people suck. That's what I think about. And even that's not judgment, because no matter who it is that you are, no matter what your life perspective is, when you come into this building, when I come into the building, my role as a leader is to make sure that everybody feels a sense of belonging. And it doesn't matter what your title is. It does not matter. Are we going to step up to that purpose and that mission? Are we going to coach folks to be kinder and more empathetic and more open and more vulnerable? Are we going to lead by example? Are we going to consistently hold people accountable to being the person that they need to be for the benefit of not just the residents, but our team members? Are we going to stop calling team members employees and staff and direct reports and subordinates? You talk about culture change, and whether you're into the Eden alternative, it doesn't, whatever the thing is, I don't know that anybody wants their loved one, their son or daughter, or anybody that we're attached to come home feeling like an employee and not a partner and not a team member and not a colleague. I can't conquer this race thing. I can't conquer this discrimination thing. I can't conquer this prejudice thing as it exists currently in the world, given where I sit in my living room right now having this conversation. But I'm clear about my purpose with the 13 folks that are on the conversation. I'm clear about my purpose. And when I get to my building, I'm clear about my leaders and I'm clear about my team members.
Christopher, we have about 4 minutes left, and I don't know about the rest of you, but as I've listened to Christopher, whether it was in his session for the webinar or as we've been preparing for this, I love his message because it is not the message I expected to hear about the key to diversity, but it's certainly one I believe that it is all about culture. It is all about knowing the person. That's how I overcome that. So I did want to make sure we had an opportunity that if anybody came to this, I'd love to hear we'd like to hear your reactions, your response to what Christopher has shared. And also, if you came to this conversation with something you wanted on the table, we would welcome you to put it on the table now. What a quiet group.
Oh, it's all good. There's a processing group, right?
I just wanted to say something, Christopher, about something you said that really resonated with me. I was doing a presentation one time as part of a grant-funded project to residents and staff members of a nursing home about culture change and just about person-centered care and things like that. And it was a nursing home that I would describe as very institutional and very traditional. And one of the residents in the audience raised his hand and said, you know, we're told all the time that we have no money here. And it just sounds like some of the things you're talking about cost money. If there was one thing that you could tell us to do or suggest that we do that doesn't cost any money, that would actually make changes to our culture, what would it be? And I said, if everybody spent another minute with a person and just asked about them and learned who they were and started developing a relationship, that would begin to change your culture.
Yep.
And it's what you said in 30 seconds. I mean, I'm with Joan, you know, it's all about relationships. And we talk so much about deeply knowing a person and developing a relationship. And once you hear someone's story, you can't argue with a story. You can't argue with that person's story. And so I think your message just resonates so deeply with me when you talk about that.
Hey, Penny, I appreciate that. And so as the organization trainer, as a staff developer, like I can create all kinds of things. And I find there are not a whole lot of organizations that I shared have actually created modules and curriculum and possibly change performance reviews, like the structural things to create community. So no matter what level it is, I just want us to exercise our influence at whatever level it is. And if I was to come to your organization, Eileen, if I was to come to your organization, Nancy, you know, Jessica, I've been to the association. I'm just thinking like whatever the organization is, when I show up, I just want to ask, well, wait a minute, let me just check in with you. Can I trust you in your position and your influence to create the kind of environment where I'm going to feel valued and appreciated? And what I also find interesting and why I'm grateful for Pioneer and very grateful for you, Joan, is that like when I'm asked to do these diversity, you know, there's a bunch of stuff that I present on. There's a bunch of stuff, right? And I think it's all humanity based. But now it has the diversity, equity, and inclusion in the title now, right? And I'll put it out there in addition to the teamwork, in addition to world-class customer care and all the rest of it. And there have been some association or conference planners that said, no, we need to tackle something light. And then I think, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Huh. And it feels like code to me. It feels like we don't have the bandwidth to get into, and I get it. There's so much going on right now. My message has always been about humanity first, always, because that's something that levels the playing field. And we all want to feel valued and appreciated, and we all have battles and struggles and challenges, and we all have issues. All of us do. And all of a sudden, if somebody says, oh, well, that was racist or you're prejudiced, well, don't all lives matter? And then all of a sudden, we're triggered. We're triggered. Yeah, go
I was
for
just going to say, Christopher, one of the things that struck me in your framing of the Marianne Williamson quote, which I love, and took me back to a small group conversation I had on Monday night, is just the idea of freeing ourselves from our fears. As human beings, we all have fears, and we don't usually talk about those. And we don't always affirm that, even though I don't completely understand the basis from which your fear is leading you, I have to honor that you have fear, and
Mhm,
you need to honor the experience of my own fear,
mhm,
because so much in our larger culture right now is fear based, and
mhm,
it's digging into those larger fears over which we feel like we have no control,
mhm.
that until we really start to address those and talk about those and admit we all are afraid, and what are the scripts, what are the things that are contributing to that, um, that's another opportunity for finding commonality and kind of getting past the noise of the culture, and digging down to our own experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know who said it, but are you motivated by fear or love? Right? And we talk about love so much, don't we? In the work that we do, we talk about love so much, at least by way of the website and the brochures. But then that belonging says, well, does everybody who is currently under the employ of the organization feel loved by the organization? Right? We apply it to one population, but not the ones that we say, oh, you're the first thing that they see in the morning when they get up, and the last one they see when they go to bed. Of course, you're important. And then we hear, I'm just an aide. And that's the third thing that I've heard for the last 20 years. We got to figure out how we're going to stop folks from believing they're just an aide, and stop leaders from believing I'm just a director, or I'm just a manager, or I'm just the regional blah blah, or I'm just the district this. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Is that beast training? Like how to be a beast, right? How to live more fully into who you are as a human being. Yeah. So I'm a co-host, Joan, and I know we have to wrap this thing up. If and the recording I guess has to stop, but I would be more than happy to hang out for a little bit for us to continue this conversation in my living room if you'd like.
I think we're great, and I'll even keep the recording going.
Oh,
And I would like to welcome Lori and Pammy, and I apologize. My gut is that you're a victim of one of the emails that went out that had a time zone issue on it. So I see you've just recently joined us, and we hope you'll catch the first part on the recording. But if Christopher is willing to hang in there with us and chat a little bit longer, as long as you are all willing, I'll keep the chat going.
no.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it was a misunderstanding of time zone. So looking forward to listening to the recording. Thank
Hang
you.
on here because Christopher said he'll stay on. So if anybody would like to. Um, okay.
I would be very interested in what you're thinking or what you're feeling. So the virtual thing, this is a little bit unusual because we can see eyeballs, right? And it's a little bit different than what usually occurs. And part of me says, well, does this make sense? How are you feeling? Where are you struggling? I know that one of my roles, and usually during every single other training and my role in my organization, is I just want to be an honest friend, right? I want you to, I got you, no worries, no judgment, no value. I trust you, we're good. And that also sometimes brings down that anxiety level about, well, I don't want to ask this question that might seem, or I probably should know that, so I won't ask. Are you kidding me? How do we can't build relationship if we're governed by the fear of not asking the question or sharing a perspective. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's a great sentiment, because if people are afraid to come to us, how do we lead them?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about leveling that playing field, that we are all, like you said, sharing that human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when we do the session where we share stories, it's so important just to give people a platform to say, this is who I am. These have been my struggles. And this is where I've come from, and that's why I'm here now.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody else in the group might go, oh my gosh, I went through a similar experience. And then all of a sudden you're not alone. And when you walk down the hallway, you'll never look at that person the same way again.
No.
And, you know, one of my core beliefs is when you know somebody's story, there's absolutely no way you can ignore them or treat them like they're not really people.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have staff members and I know their story, like you were talking about doing the write-ups and the corrective actions, if I know that somebody is struggling with maybe the death of a loved one and or they're dealing with a family member that has dementia at home and they're doing that self-care, what if I have to counsel them for something or do a performance evaluation, if I don't know those things and I don't know what's going on in their world, I'm not giving them a fair performance evaluation. Because if I know somebody is struggling caring for a loved one at home and coming in here and giving their 100% that they can here, I have to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Now, it might not be my 100%, but it's theirs.
Yeah.
And I have to appreciate that they're bringing that to the table and that they're still showing up every day to take care of our members and each other.
That sounds like, Jackie, that sounds like an exhale, right? When somebody can be themselves, it's an exhale. And there's the belonging. And I think everything that we're talking about, it's research based. So it's not, you know, if I'm not a huggy person, what are you telling me I need to come in and hug people? Is that what you're telling me right now? I said that creating a sense of belonging and just psychological safety leads to everybody staying in the department. And if losing an aide or a med tech, you know, costs us an additional $8,000 to $10,000, and an LPN or RN costs anywhere from between $35,000 to $65,000 in replacement costs and knowledge and advertising and now agency staff, and we have to fill the need and we have to divert resources. How many hundreds of thousands of dollars are our organizations losing that could go to raises, more celebrations, better Nurses Week gifts? I'm just thinking about all the stuff that we say that we can't afford because we're not coaching struggling people up or coaching struggling people out. I find that some individuals in our organizations are responsible for up to $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year, and we're not even tracking it in replacement costs. And that's kind of scary because we each know somebody who you probably would not want a family member to join their team.
Oh yeah.
And there it is, there's the courage. When each of us feels really good in our purpose and our mission, I don't need to confront anybody, but I can influence. I can learn their story. I can ask if they're open to feedback. I can ask, how can I support you today? I can say, oh my goodness gracious, it looks like you're at your wit's end. I have 2 ears, right? So even the fear in doing that is not necessarily about conflict and confrontation, because I think most of us avoid conflict and confrontation.
I think that's such a big factor in it too, Christopher, is that avoidance of conflict and confrontation. So, you know, the journey to really create diversity is very much the same journey, I think, as to create the culture that is what we advocate for. It starts with knowing the person. It starts with looking at things different, having the courage. And it's as much the how and the why as it is the what. And the what's easy to do. I can, you know, for example, I can say we want to honor diversity. So we're going to give a gift to all of our African American employees during African American month, the month that we honor them all. Or I could really, and that's wonderful, that's a lovely thing, but that doesn't fix anything. that instead I could say, we're going to look at our culture for everyone in our culture. We're going to find ways to get to know you better, to understand you, because you are you. We always say that if I know one resident, I know one resident. If I know one employee, I don't care who you are, what your background is, I only know one employee, because there's so much diversity in all of us. And I love the message that you send, which is not an easy fix.
Mm-mm.
But if we really want to change, it's a road we have to go down.
And it starts with me. The change starts with me.
There's that aha. We all have to have our own aha moments.
Yeah. Hey, Arlene, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm still listening in. I'm sorry. I
Oh,
thought
stop
it
it.
was
Don't-
11 o'clock, but
Quit it. No more apologies. So from what you've heard, what are you thinking about our conversation? What you've been able to hear?
well, I think everybody needs to have inclusion, whether it's whoever you're working with, if it's in the field, if it's, working at work or with your family, whatever, you just always need to, I think you always need to feel like you need to include everybody and make them feel like they're included. Because if you don't, then you got people, over here saying, oh, she's not that good, or, and then you start creating, rife and all kinds of problems. So,
Yep.
I think just being aware, especially if you're a manager or if you're a supervisor. I've not actually supervised in the Red Cross. I probably could, but I don't really want to right now because I was a manager for 20 years in our health department here. So, I get it. We all have our issues sometimes where it's like, oh, I wish they would have done this better or that better. But you got to get the feedback from people. And if they don't, if you don't hear from them, you don't know what's going on.
Arlene, give me a virtual high five. Because there's part of that fear though too. And Alan, I see that the residents need to feel included too. I'm currently working with an organization that has 13 buildings, that the presentations that I'm giving, and it's a series, it's like a series of 4 ending with like a town hall. So they get some stuff, 3 sessions, and then there's the town hall, but they've included their board members and included their residents and included all of their team members at all levels, because it's us. This is the family. This is the relationship that we're endeavoring to build, and everybody's speaking the same language. That's, Alan, that's critical. That's absolutely critical. But Arlene, how many of us have actually approached the folks that either are our peers or the folks that report to us and said, hey, I want to make sure that this is the best experience that you have had. I want to be the best leader you've had, and I need some feedback. Like, would you be willing to share feedback? I find that is a rare thing, that we seek out honest feedback because of that fear.
Well, it's sort of like what you were talking earlier about with conflict. Nobody likes to deal with conflict. There's no doubt about it. I've been on 2 deployments, and both deployments were excellent in a lot of ways. There was some issues on the second deployment, more from the top, and there was some, it was just chaotic. And unfortunately, there were, what would I call it? Ill feelings, I guess, because of the chaos that was happening at the top. If you got a fairly run, smooth organization, no matter what you have at the top, it'll flow down. If it's unorganized or people are not listening to people, it'll also flow down. And I remember, and I did do this, in my second deployment in North Carolina. I had a team that I had been with. I called it my dream team. But anyway, I had been on this team for probably about 6 days, and then I got separated from them. But they were still in communication with me, and And it got to the point where they were being left alone out there and were not being helped with what they needed. And I finally, I ended up going to one of the people that was in the lead at the time for herbs and for food. They weren't even getting that. It was bad. It was really bad. And so I finally just went up to him. I said, hey, you need to see what's going on here. These guys are really hurting. And so, hopefully that helped a little bit. But I mean, if nobody ever brings it up, how do you know? You don't know what you don't know,
Right. Yeah. You made me think about a couple things, Arlene. There's this book called The Culture Code, and there are several examples, specifically military and deployment examples in the Culture Code and the relationships we have with our team members and then also our leaders. And I'll put this out as a challenge to everybody. I don't want to read stuff that I absolutely agree with, right? Because I want to be open to stuff. Here's the challenge that I have for any of you. If there is anything that you have read or seen that says leadership isn't that important to creating culture, I'd love to read that. Because everything that I've read says that if there's struggle among our leaders, then the team member is going to struggle with clarity, with direction, with vision. It's there's a saying that says, when the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. And welcome to the workforce crisis. And there we are. There we are. That's and also the bravery, Arlene, with going to stand up and speak for somebody that is not you, is exactly what it is that we need right now. Exactly. Oh, I appreciate you guys so much. Hey, Alan. Oh, we have two Allens. I don't know that I've ever been in a session with two Allens. Hey, Alan Radke, anything come up for you as you're listening and contributing?
And the first names are spelled the same too. That's a miracle. Well, I really appreciate this. I'm obviously a Red Cross volunteer, in case you couldn't pick up on
I
that.
couldn't tell.
I couldn't, I was amazed to see that there were, and I was in North Carolina too once, but I can't remember what year it was. It hasn't been that long, but anyway, my daughter's a occupational therapist, but she's a rehab manager for Legacy Healthcare in Colorado. And Pioneer Network, of course, I advertise the Pioneer Network wherever I go. I'm just a dad and a son. And so all of this is very meaningful to me. I was an administrator with the public schools for 33 years. So we used to talk about in education, trying to work with educators is like herding cats because of academic freedom. But yeah, the notion of belonging, and I was special education. So the notion of belonging and inclusion means a lot to me. And after I retired, and I did a session at one of the networks, Pioneer Network conferences in Colorado, in Denver, on something we called Circle of Friends in special ed. And it was a big movement and still is. And the focus was on the individual student being educated in a general ed classroom and developing what we called a circle of friends for that student. And I thought this, for clients, or excuse me, residents, including my mother, we went ahead and did that with her. She was in assisted living. And it was a very nice place, and their progress over the years, I've kept up with them. My mom died now. She was 92 then, has been amazing. But anyway, the notion was developing that circle of friends, and everything that we talk about in this, in the Pioneer Network, the organization, and it's just so encouraging. I just wish, it's like some of the things I do, it's like, it's too bad everybody doesn't have this resource and use it, because my poor daughter suffers. She's such a good, caring person, but she just comes into the resident, into the facility. She's not a employee of the facility. They contract with her. So I send her your website, and I send her everything I get that talks about you guys. And I don't know if it's going to make a difference, but this is so, and I, as a member of the Red Cross, we're obviously struggling with inclusion and culture change. And I'm not sure why we haven't done this about 50 years ago, but that's the way things, I do know why we're doing it now. But that too is, so anything I see on inclusion and culture change, and I jump right on it to figure it out. But this, you got it right. As far as I'm concerned, that's the way, I did it in my schools where I was the administrator. Some people don't want to be included. They just leave me alone. Get out of my class.
That's America, right? That's a freedom of choice.
That's that academic freedom crap. Anyway, I'm sorry.
There were,
when you're doing something right, you want everybody to do it. When you think you're doing something right, I should say.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Son, you said dad, education, Alan. Yep, we're part of the same club there. I'll also, two more things with what you shared with me. If there's anything that I'm sharing, and I mean, there's so many resources, there's so many like YouTube, really quick YouTube clips. I'm just thinking about all articles and all the stuff that, that are at the ready. If you think there's anything that your daughter can use to help affect some change where she is, by all means, I'd be more than happy to share whatever I can do. The other thing
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. The other thing, Alan, is you said something about I have no idea if it'll work or something like that. You know what brings me peace, Alan, is look, I can do what I can do, and whatever happens, whatever they do with it, they do with it. But I know that I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm just going to keep coming. I don't know what else to do. That's what I can control.
I have to say this. My kids say I have a story for everything, but I read a Michener book, and it was about Texas, I believe, and the one Texas was the name. And in there they interviewed a Texas Ranger. I can't remember his name. And they said, "What's your key to success?" He says, "No, I'm right and keep coming." So anyway.
Yeah, there's so many pieces.
No, you're right. And keep
everything
coming.
that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I've never been more clear about my purpose than over the last 5 years, to be perfectly honest. And part of it is self, right? Personal agenda, the safety of my family, whatever I can do to make sure that they have just as much access as anybody else. And I'll tell you what, if you hire me, I'm going to keep coming, right? I mean, I'm just thinking about the organizations that I'm involved in. If you hire me, you're getting this whole thing, and you're getting mission, and you're getting purpose, and there's going to be some challenge, and I'm going to invite you into bravery, but I don't know what else to do, right? I'm not going to spend any time wishing or hoping or fingers crossed, or complaining. Oh my goodness gracious. No more, I'm done with complaining. Complaining doesn't solve anything. When was the last time you were in a meeting with a bunch of like-minded folks, and maybe it was at your organization? I'll tell you what we need, gang. You know what? We need to do a little bit more complaining. That doesn't solve anything. And you know what else doesn't happen? We're sitting around trying to figure out how we going to get more PPE around here, and where the prices aren't going to be gouged. You know what we need around here? We need a couple more bosses to figure this out. Those sentences have never been uttered in the experience of human beings. Neither one of them are effective nor work.
You know, Christopher, as we will probably at some point have to close this conversation, though we hate to. I think about something I had shared with you on an earlier conversation. My favorite quote of my mother's was, "Common sense ain't such a common commodity." And, you know, when I first, and I've known Christopher for a lot of years, so I know his style, but, you know, you see this title, you see a conversation on diversity and inclusion. And as was talked about at the very beginning, sometimes there's some fear to, oh my gosh, what kind of questions am I going to be asked?
Yep.
Am I going to be put in a situation where I'm uncomfortable talking about it and everything else? And yet the context that Christopher puts us all into is, as we said before, not the easy answer, but the bigger answer, which is it is all about culture. It is all about knowing people as individuals. And if my culture supports it, just like Jackie shared with us of the incredible culture they have built at Park Springs, if my foundation is knowing the people I work with, of valuing the people I work with, and creating processes and systems in my organization that really make that happen. So I'm not just talking the talk. Then the conversations that now will have to follow will be a lot easier because I'm having them with a friend. I'm having them with someone that I know and I respect. And then we can move forward. But the first part of this isn't easy. But Christopher, it just plain common sense in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, this is Arlene again. Yeah, I was thinking, you know, part of why I wanted to listen to this whole thing, I will eventually, is that since the end of April, I've had an opportunity. I'm a nurse, and I also have a lot of mental health background and behavioral health. But I've had an opportunity to work like just a part-time position as a nurse needs assessment coordinator and caseworker for an organization here in Iowa called Embark. And it's basically working with refugees and immigrants, or what we call newcomers. So, you know, I work with people from, you know, all over the place. I mean, Congolese, Marshallese, Burmese, Liberians, you know, Americans, you know, but I mean, some of these folks, you know, the team that I work with, when we have our meetings, it's just so humbling in some ways. And it's also so cool because I see all different cultures and all different kinds of cultures that are bringing things to the table that some things I'm not really used to. So it's been a real open experience. And everybody, most people in this organization are younger than I am, but that's okay, you know. But you know, it's just been a really fun experience, and you know, I do everything virtually or on the phone. You know, so you know, for COVID and stuff, so that's been nice. And I'd like to meet my clients eventually, but I can't right now in this environment. But it's just been a great opportunity. I've been with them for 6-7 months now, and it's just so neat to be able to work with such a diverse group.
To me, that makes sense because we have a diverse group in our buildings, and that exploration doesn't often occur to find out what we do have in our buildings. Right? It's neat. So I'm right outside of Philly now, and the organization that I work for is in central Pennsylvania, Lancaster and Gettysburg and Mechanicsburg. A lot of historic places where individuals still fly their Confederate flag, and they work at my organization. And I'm responsible for 1,399 other people, and I don't know what's going on behind anybody's eyes, and it's not value and it's not judgment. And I'm still clear about my purpose in the organization itself. And there's no way that change or influence can occur when we judge, right? So it's fascinating. I struggle with it sometimes just because that Confederacy piece is antithetical to my background and heritage and what that means and everything else. But I have a mission. I have a job to do, and I don't care who steps in the classrooms that I run. Oh, you're a dad too? Me too. And I don't know how else to approach it. I really don't. Lastly, I'll end with this. So Joan, I'm trying to think of, yeah. So this title, like the title is a conversation or advice from your, honest advice from your Black friend Christopher. I couldn't imagine if I started floating this, hey, diversity, equity, inclusion session. It's not me, right? Look, I want to throw a firecracker, but I'll run with you towards it. This is us, gang. Let's get into it. And I always want to spur interest because I'm interested. I want to be interested and not annoyed. I want to be interested and not filled with blame or guilt or shame. I want to be interested. That's a different thing. Interest, when we become interested about situations or people or circumstances, it's a different strategy, and it'll get to a different outcome rather than, I know who you are, let me get defensive because you're going to come at me with this all lives matter crap. And let me tell you, yeah, all lives might matter, but you're not being targeted right now. And I get it. Got it. But the strategy is a little bit different for me. I need us to get along, and it's selfish, but I'll tell you what, it's also organizational. It's also community-wide. We have to get along because there's COVID. I don't know if you guys are experiencing COVID, but yeah, and murder hornets. Come on.
Yeah, murder hornets are pretty amazing. I'm glad they're out in Washington State.
Oh, they're heading
Other
toward
coast.
Iowa. Oh, Arlene, I tell you what, if we're not on it, we're all going to be experiencing murder hornets.
There you
I'm
go.
sure.
Well, on that note, Christopher, I want to thank you for those last comments were wonderful, a wonderful way to end it. It's always a privilege to share in conversation with you. I think everything starts with a conversation, which is why we're choosing to do these, and we hope to do more in 2021, because we got to talk with each other, and we got to talk about the easy things. We've got to talk about the hard things, but we've got to talk about them with compassion and sharing. So on that note, I am going to officially end the session by stopping the recording, but so grateful to all who participated to the end throughout it. If you're listening to this recording later on, if you missed it and just see it on the recording, we're so happy to have you part of the conversation, and there'll be more to come.